This is a Sony Mavica FD7 camera. Okay, it looks like a normal camera from back then, but this one is special because it stores all its photos on floppy disks. And what makes it even more special is that it was one of the first to use floppy disks as a storage medium. I recently picked up this FD7 cheap on eBay, and it's crying out for some love. So let's take a look at this camera and test it, whether it works in this restoration episode. Hey everyone! For a future video I wanted to get some old cameras, and this one is a must-have, the Sony Mavica. As I mentioned in the intro, I bought it on eBay with a carrying strap, floppy disks and a rechargeable battery for like 35 bucks, but it was listed as defective because the seller couldn't test it. And that's where we come in. But first I have to confess something. When it arrived I had to clean it a little bit because it was covered in a disgusting layer of dust. Just look at the carrying strap, it's just disgusting. Only a couple of spots are still a little dirty, which we can remove. Unfortunately, I can't really use my cleaning products to clean it thoroughly, because then the paint of the camera will come off. So alcohol won't work, but glass cleaner works reasonably well. But now it's as clean as it can be. But the question remains whether it still works. And this Mavica doesn't have a plug to connect it to a power source. It gets all its power down here from the battery pack. But the battery that came with the Mavica is almost 30 years old, and I doubt it still works. Well, I then found an original charger on eBay for like 12 bucks with free shipping. I also ordered a new battery for it for around $14, and by the way, I also got one for a mini DV camera for about the same price. Speaking of mini DV cameras, when I took a closer look at this Sony PC9e, I noticed that the contacts look almost identical to the battery pack from the Mavica. Of course, it didn't fit physically, but the mini DV has a power plug so that the battery can be charged. I then did a silly experiment where I connected the Mavica battery to the PC9e via alligator clips to charge it. I would not recommend trying this at home, but it worked, as long as I held down the third pin for data. What fascinated me even more was that the battery actually still holds a charge after almost 30 years. Because the camera starts up with this battery. You know what we do now? Well, we put this almost fully charged battery into the Mavica. And nothing happened. Not a beep from the camera. Well, it could also be that the battery isn't charged enough to turn on this Mavica. But what happens if I plug the terminals of the PC9e battery connector directly into the Mavica instead of into the battery first? Well, that's another experiment that can only go wrong. But nothing happens there either. It didn't matter because the charger and the batteries for both cameras then arrived by mail. I left the original battery on the charger for about 2 hours to make sure it had enough juice. But I put in the replacement battery anyway, and then I realized that it was a little too big and you had to really press it in. You can only get it out with pliers. Yeah, not good. So with a freshly charged battery, I plugged it in and still nothing. It gradually became apparent to me that this Mavica was really broken. The fact that nothing happens makes it a bit difficult to find the fault here. But then I got a little bit lucky because I found this Sony TRV-5E camera at a company that clears out apartments, also for around $35. And it's a complete set, yeah? Like, it has a charger, a power supply for the camera, spare batteries, mini DV cassettes, and even the original receipt. Yeah, you can also take a look here at the original receipt from a German electronics store back then, from the year 1999. And it says here for the payment that it cost 2,358 mark 99, which is in dollars at about 1,401 US dollar. Yeah, in 99. But now you are probably wondering what it has to do with the Mavica here. Well, the battery that goes into this camera is the same as the one in the Mavica. This means that I can now power the Mavica directly with electricity, where the battery is not the sticking point in troubleshooting. And even with the direct power supply, nothing works. This means that we will try to see if we can repair it. I was happy to find the official Sony service manual on how to disassemble this camera, which also includes a pinout of all the boards inside. Since no power is coming through, it would be interesting to see if everything is working properly from the power source. In other words, whether there is an interruption somewhere in the line. To do this, we have to open it. Okay, so it's less complicated than I thought. What's interesting is that where the battery goes in, there's a large cable that goes into the main board, which we disconnect. On the battery compartment, the camera tells us that there are fuses, which is a good clue for diagnostics. A little further apart, I see the contacts on the battery cover where the battery goes in. And yes, as the battery compartment already revealed, there are SMD fuses. I can easily measure them with my multimeter, and I think I found why my camera won't turn on. All 4 fuses are blown. No power is flowing through. On the one hand, it's great that we found the source of the problem and why this camera isn't working. But it's surprising that the fuses are broken, and especially that all 4 of them are broken. I can imagine that I did something wrong in my experiments, even though I paid attention to the polarity and everything else. Well, at least I think we know what it could be. Unfortunately, I somehow lost the records where I bypassed the fuses for testing, but at least I have a photo of how it works. I didn't want to leave it connected for long, because who knows what might happen. These fuses do have some use, after all. I ordered SMD fuses on eBay for $5 plus shipping. A few days later, they arrived in the mail. Super tiny. And to be honest, I've never sorted SMD stuff before. So this is new territory for me. And above all, this size is brutal when you're doing it with the naked eye. Here's a penny for comparison. How am I supposed to do that? But what shocked me was the difference in size. The new fuses are much smaller. But anyway, I installed them anyway, because after almost 30 years, I think it's possible that they're simply gotten smaller. Then I'll get started on the SMD soldering. At first I wasn't sure if the old fuses would come out easily, but with hot air they came out without any problems. And then we come to the new fuses. I apologize in advance for the very silly looks on the board, because I had to really concentrate here. After soldering each fuse, I measured the continuity and all 4 have a solid connection. It may not look pretty, but it's inside the housing where no one can see it. And hey, it's a solid connection. Then I quickly reassemble the camera and see if it works now. But before we do that, I wanted to take a look at the belt in the floppy drive, if there is one, to see if it's worn out. However, I think I'll leave it alone because there are several cables attached that I don't know how to disconnect. Oh well, never mind. Quickly reassemble it, insert a freshly charged battery and try it out. By the way, this is a camera's flash. I wouldn't recommend messing around with it, because the capacitor is rated for 100 volts, and who knows what kind of voltages are involved here. So, now the moment you've all been waiting for. Does it work now? And indeed it works now! And the floppy drive seems to be working too. I had to take, of course, a few photos to test the function, and that works too. I'll save everything for the camera for a review, but feel free to enjoy the pictures of it. And so, there we have it. We've revived a defective Sony Mavica. Kind of fitting to Halloween. And what about the camera belt here? Or as I would call the pedo belt. To be honest, I forgot about it. But I stowed it into my washing machine in a laundry bag, so that looks pretty again. Because, well, I think some people know it, but I have an obsession with Sony devices. Later I also replaced the CR2032 battery, so that the memory settings and the time would be retained. I don't have any video of this, but it is replaced in the right hand corner of the display, here in this little door here. Now, what I still want to get off my hands here is why I'm making a video like that, even though it was a silly fix like these fuses. Well, to show that in life, it's the little things that can change everything. Just like in this camera here. And I'll be doing a review of the camera in the future, so don't miss it out. Subscribing would be handy here. Well, but now I'll take a few photos with this camera, but before that, I'll just say, we'll see us.